Hi, this is Curt Robbins from Higher Learning LV in Las Vegas, and welcome to this week's Curt's Cannabis Corner. This week, I'm joined by Alana Armstrong from the Alan Aldous PR agency in Toronto, and the one and only David Rheins, Executive Director of the Marijuana Business Association in beautiful Seattle, Washington. And this week, we decided to talk about and write about how cannabis, especially long-term consumption, affects memory and cognitive performance. What do you think about this, Mr. Rheins?
What was interesting about the article is that scientifically we were not able to prove or disprove that there was any impairment as a result of cannabis. But I will cop to the fact that cannabis sometimes can allow your thoughts to drift elsewhere.
But that might be a creative function. Maybe it's stimulating creativity, perhaps.
I find it's interesting because we've spent the past a bunch of episodes talking about the particular differences between the cannabinoids and the terpenoids and the flavonoids and how those all combined into unique experiences to the individual based on their endocannabinoid system. I think is an individual thing depending on the person.
So it's subjective efficacy.
It's a subjective thing.
In my experience, short-term memory loss is an effect that I experience. Something that's, of course, struck me at first in Curt's article was the point that he made about DARE. My first experience with cannabis was through DARE. Studies have shown that, short-term memory is affected. One interesting thing, though, that I want to bring up is the other side of memory loss to do with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Long-term memory loss versus the short-term. That's right.
Right, exactly. THC may supposedly knock off some of those amyloid proteins that act as basically plaque in your brain. Plus, CBD being an anti-inflammatory, inflammation is also something that affects the brain. I would love to see the two things kind of parsed out a little bit better. So short-term memory loss being immediate reaction to maybe higher THC versus what it can do for long-term brain health.
Unlike some of the other topics that we've discussed, when you get into brain function, you get into mental function, you get into exactly how our thoughts created, exactly what are memories and where do they live. Brain scientists don't know.
It's a bit philosophical, right?
It really is. It is one of those great unknowns. So there's types of memories is what I'm suggesting. So as a musician, I can tell you, and as an artist, I can tell you that cannabis actually makes it easier to remember music, makes it easier to remember complex creative thought or approach, technique. Cannabis's impact on our neuro pathways and our cognition is very complex, and I don't think it's as binary as yes, it improves or no, it's not like gas mileage.
So what did you think about some of the specific research? The article cited 6 different studies, and what is a little controversial here for proponents of cannabis medicine is they did say there is short-term memory impact in a negative way, but only over a short term. All of these 6 studies said if you cease consumption for between 7 and 90 days, their best testing could show no discrepancy whatsoever between the consumers and the non-consumers.
And these are studies that I've come across before. It certainly makes sense to me that the short-term memory is affected, that the effects don't have to be necessarily long-term. Your article, Curt, reminded me of a study that was started back in 1972 in Canada to study the effects of basically daily smoking.
Heavy usage.
Women, they used 20 women. Those who were smoking cannabis throughout the day, their productivity increased. Kind of the conditions of the study that
Right.
that worry me.
It's study
That's
integrity,
right.
right? We talked about
And your
misinformation.
motivations going in to these things. I think Alana touched on a really good point. A lot of this depends on the dosage. So you start with the potency. We've talked about the very, the profile, the cannabinoid and terpenoid profile of what you're consuming, but also how much and over what period of time. So you put me in a room over lunch and give me 2 joints, and I'm feeling like, hey, let's build something. You put other people in a room with 2 joints over lunch and they want to take a nap. So it all depends on the person and their habituation. If you smoke weed long term, are you going to turn into some kind of a vegetable who has trouble functioning in
Nobody wants
normal
that.
society?
Does cannabis consumption, and what the heck does that even mean, right? There's a lot of molecules in there, more than 400. Cannabis, and let's say a little more specifically, delta-9 THC, does that have a negative impact upon one's lifestyle, their personal life, their career, their performance, their capability, their accuracy in said performance? And so far, the research is saying short term, and what do they mean by that? Between 7 and let's say 30, 60 days, maybe. Yes, they were able to test and see those deficiencies. Long term, they said they basically evaporated. Does delta-9 THC negatively impact short-term memory? The research is saying yes.
And the other thing is, depends on what job you're doing, right? So maybe heart surgery, I do want a sober surgeon. I'm going to go ahead and be old school there and say, yeah. But if you're playing bass in my fusion band, don't show up sober. Man, you better smoke a joint before you get on stage.
So back to set and setting, it depends.
It goes back to what our discussion about misinformation. And for those of you who didn't see it, please tune in. I thought that was a fun one. I think it all is about intentionality. So this research is designed to show what? Are we really concerned about our health? Or is this designed to say, here's justification for prohibitionists?
The study I brought up earlier, the Canadian one from 1972, that was spearheaded by the conservatives to, kind of prove that dope makes you a dope.
To your point, Dave, about the only thing we can take away from these studies with confidence is that perhaps for some people, there is some negative impact to short-term memory, but what every single one of these studies, even that does not last. So cessation of consumption, and suddenly we see no discernible impact. And it harkens the topic of use with intent. Do you intend to unplug your brain and just jam out on Xbox and eat pizza? Do you intend to sit down and edit your PhD thesis? Okay, so everyone in the room here, safe to say we're daily consumers? Because we're all people who get paid to use our brains. So if cannabis consumption is having a discernible negative impact on our cognitive function or memory, we would probably decrease or cease usage. Am I correct?
For sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But we're not. And I know this is just anecdotal, but we've talked about the formal research studies and the pros and the cons. Anecdotally, though, here we are, 3 people who get paid to have decent cognitive functioning if we can.
Now, back in the day when I worked at Rolling Stone, where the insurance companies were making employers sign drug policies. And as an employee, you had to say, I will not get high at work. And they sent a memo around that said there will be absolutely no pot smoking at the office before 5 p.m. And the editors went nuts. They went outraged. They say, hey, man, this is Rolling Stone. We can't write these reviews. We can't put this magazine out without smoking pot. And so then we got a second memo that said, essentially, they say there will be no pot smoking before 5 o'clock. Unless you're in the editorial department or a creative on deadline, double star, double asterisk.
But it's interesting, Dave, that you point out that here are some highly trained professionals who say, hey, cannabis helps us do our jobs. And in fact, we're going to get pissed off if you take it away from us.
Seth Rogen said this week, admitted on national TV, that he smokes weed all day, every day. It helps him do his job. As I've been privileged to work at some amazing places full of really top minds. Cannabis was always a part of all of those, whether that was the music industry or the media industry or the high-tech industry, full of regular pot smokers.
What's interesting, it's not just Nashville or Hollywood, but it's also Silicon Valley, right?
How many of the world's richest men are regular cannabis consumers? Talk amongst yourselves. Now, how we got to this, I forget.
Good one. Good one. Let me light another joint and try to remember what the hell we were talking about.
Hold on, man. I knew there was something I was going to say.
Dude.
Wait, what did you say 15 minutes ago?
Wait. You know what? Hold on a second. What was the question?
Who is this chick?
Yeah. Oh, wait, are you recording? I thought you were recording, man.
I forgot to record.
You were supposed to press record.
No, I have been on podcasts, and I think some with Curt, where the host, in fact, did forget to record. And even worse, I have been on several where they forgot to edit.
Both are painful shortcomings of the production process.
Oh, I know. And without them, though, it's like eating the bologna without taking the casing off.
I love editing, quite honestly, because just snip, snip, snip.
I like how you do the merge.
Thank God you do.
And I never know what little snippets you'll pull out, you know.
Screw it. Just go forward. Like, leave your last little droplet of wisdom, and then we'll wrap up number 6.
Alana here, endorsing your cannabis use, but not endorsing you forgetting to check out Alan Aldous.
Alan Aldous, man, it's where all the cool kids are hanging, I'm telling you.
My last word about memory and cannabis, I had something really witty, but I forgot what it was.
Dude.
So just be careful out there, boys and girls. This is not your father's cannabinoids.
I'm just glad you forgot I owe you $20.
What I would say, actually, let me do mine again.
Okay, I haven't stopped. Yeah. We're still recording. So
thank you, Curt. You know, the topic of memory in cannabis is a controversial one because I think there's a lot of perspectives to it. I would encourage those of you who haven't yet done so to check out your in-depth article, which cites half a dozen scientific studies. I think you'll find those to be quite enlightening.
Thanks to Mr. David Rheins from MJBA in sunny Seattle and Alana Armstrong from Alan Aldous PR agency in Toronto. Always appreciate their input. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Curt. Have a great weekend.